All right. Well, welcome to tonight. We are going to dive into part 2 of our 3-part series of food and mood. And tonight is all about how food actually can help fuel or fizzle our mood. And it is really important to keep in mind that our food choices do have a direct impact on the way that we feel. And we know that, sometimes through the physical symptoms that we experience, but I also like to tie in how it's directly connected to things that directly impact our mood as well. So let's dive in now. As always, I just want to say hello. My name is Rochelle. I am a registered dietitian and an exercise physiologist and your host for the dietitian resource community. So let's get going. All right, so here we go. So how food fuels or fizzles your mood. So when we're thinking about this piece, it's really important to keep in mind that research does show that symptoms of mental health disorders can show similarly to symptoms of nutrient deficiencies. So I want to just do a side-by-side comparison here. When we're thinking of mental health disorders, you can actually see anxiety, depression, fatigue, irritability, low stress tolerance, mood swings, neurotransmitter depletion, overeating, and cravings, and then sleep disturbance. But we also know through the research that if we do have nutrient deficiencies, we can also see these exact same symptoms. So it is really important for our patients to recognize that their food choices, if they are depleted in specific nutrients, it can greatly impact these mental health pieces that are so rampant. We are hearing more about people experience anxiety more so now than ever, and depression, fatigue. I know that I hear that a lot with the folks that I'm talking to. And then just basically the overeating, the cravings, sleep disturbances. So it is really important that we're tying things back to our food choices. So how does this actually work? Well, we know that first, our diet and the nutrients that we eat do directly impact our mood. And how we know this is that we know that the foods that we're eating directly impact the hormones that are produced in our body. We also know that neurotransmitters, the ones that we talked about last week, we talked about serotonin, norepinephrine, and we also talked about dopamine. We're going to talk about one other one today too that is connected with mood, but those are the 3 that are most highly connected with nutrition. And then we also know that food choices are greatly impacting inflammation in our body, oxidative stress, our brain function, and if we are experiencing any gut health issues. And we can also see some micronutrient deficiencies. So these pieces can then in turn impact depression, anxiety, fatigue, stress, illness, pain, and reduction in our cognition or mental function. So I just wanted to kind of walk through that pathway of those food choices impact the things that are going on in our body, the things that are actually reacting and occurring, the biochemical actual pathways, and then that is greatly impacting the way that we feel. So how does this actually work? Well, let's talk about how neurotransmitters are made in our body. And we're going to start with one that we've heard a lot of about in the news and from just talking to, our friends, family members. We're going to talk about how to make serotonin. So last week we talked about the importance of serotonin with kind of a calm experience of our mood, but there are specific nutrients that are needed to create serotonin. So we need the nutrient tryptophan, we need vitamin B6, B12, folic acid, vitamin C, iron, and zinc to actually take tryptophan and convert it to serotonin. Now it's multiple pathways, obviously, but I just want to kind of show here in a simple way that all of these nutrients are needed to generate serotonin. So if we are depleted in any of these nutrients, we can see a bottleneck, right? So if we don't have folic acid, there's going to be a bottleneck in our ability to take tryptophan to serotonin. If we don't have enough iron, the same thing is true. So it's really important that all of these nutrients are available because if any of them are depleted, we can see reductions in serotonin production. So when we are thinking about grocery list items to make serotonin, we need all of these nutrients. We need tryptophan, B6, B12, folic acid, zinc, vitamin C, and iron. So we're going to talk more about grocery shopping and what foods have these nutrients in them in part 3. But for today, just want you to keep in mind that these nutrients are required for creating the actual serotonin piece that is going to bring about the good, calm moods. There is something else to keep in mind with the serotonin production. There is something called the serotonin hypothesis. So when you feel a little down, do you ever crave sweets? And this is where this hypothesis comes into play, and I'm going to help explain why this works this way. So the serotonin hypothesis is this. When we are down, we may crave carbohydrates. So when we're craving carbohydrates, that is going to lead to our pancreas releasing insulin. And then once we release the insulin, blood levels of all the amino acids except tryptophan drop because those amino acids are actually entering the cells and other body cells. So tryptophan remains at high levels in the bloodstream. And then this is the one that our brain uses to create serotonin. So it's able to enter the brain and cross the blood-brain barrier. And then once it's inside the brain, tryptophan lines up with the help of vitamin B6, B12, folic acid to be converted to serotonin. So serotonin is then stored in high amounts in our nerve cells, and that can help us improve our mood overall. So that is the key piece to keep in mind. But what happens with the cravings then? Why do we have these highs and lows of carbohydrate cravings? Well, this is a quick overview, just a similar pathway, but when we do have like the snacks that are really high in those monosaccharides that are those quick sugars, what it's going to do is it is going to elevate the insulin, and that is going to lead, to the quick uptake of the sugar into the cells, plus all of those other amino acids, and then things are going to come back down really quickly. So what happens is, yes, we do have that quick uptake of insulin, of all the blood sugar, and then all of those other amino acids, including tryptophan, to the brain because it's the one that's left in the blood. But what we ultimately know is that when there is that big shift, then there's more tryptophan in the brain. We have that really good quick mood feeling, and then things subside really quickly as well. So it's important for us to regulate blood sugar along the lines with making sure that we have a more stable mood. So in addition to all of those nutrients that we need for stable serotonin, we also need stable blood sugar. So I'm going to kind of walk through what that looks like here. So for stable blood sugar, we know that if we have highs and lows of blood sugar, it is going to change the hormones that are in our blood as well. So we know that if we have a rapid rise in blood sugar, then insulin is going to be released rapidly to help lower the blood sugar back down. Now, if our blood sugar drops too low, that is going to release the stress hormone, and that is going to trigger the rise of the blood sugar. And we might see again, or some hunger cues, because we may, feel like the blood sugar is too low. So that can lead to the cravings. And then that can again lead to the high blood sugars, once again, where insulin responds to again lower it back down. And we see these highs and lows of insulin and stress responders to keep the blood sugar, trying to keep it regulated, but our food choices aren't allowing that to happen. So we may crave more of those high sugar foods as our blood sugar is dropping, and then that can bring that high and low of the blood sugars and the mood as well. So how do we regulate that through food choices? Well, if we do get more of the complex carbohydrates that are going to help bring up that mood and bring up the insulin to help kind of get things regulated, those are going to keep our blood sugar more stable over time versus having the bigger swings, the bigger ups and downs, the peaks and the valleys. So complex carbohydrates do have more of those chains connected to each other, so it takes longer for those to be broken apart, meaning our blood sugar is going to come up much more steadily and then come back down. And that means that we're going to have less insulin released into the bloodstream, but it's still going to bring the blood sugar back down and bring those amino acids into the cells, leaving tryptophan in the bloodstream to travel to the brain, where it can be converted to serotonin so we can feel really good, but in a more stable way. So I hope that that's helpful, kind of walking you through a quick explanation of the serotonin hypothesis. I'd love any questions that you have below on this, and just a overview of why we might see some cravings for those more simple sugars when we are not eating consistently. So one of the ways that we can choose the best carbohydrates for our mood is, again, choosing more of those complex carbohydrates because they provide slow, sustained release insulin release, and then they also help us manage our blood sugar much better. So this can lead to an overall improved insulin stress hormone response and improved blood sugar control, and also ultimately reduce those cravings for foods that lead to the blood sugar highs and lows. So that is an overview of how our body is making serotonin from tryptophan and those other vitamins and minerals. So let's continue on to the next neurotransmitter that we hear a lot about, and that is dopamine and norepinephrine. So these two travel along the same pathways, and they actually require similar nutrients to be converted to each of the neurotransmitters that are listed here. So with these specific neurotransmitters, we need phenylalanine, which is an amino acid, and tyrosine. And these amino acids require B12, folic acid, B6, and vitamin C to be converted to dopamine and then eventually norepinephrine. So dopamine can be converted to norepinephrine, but it doesn't always get converted to norepinephrine. So again, we do need phenylalanine, tyrosine, B12, folic acid, B6, and vitamin C to take those amino acids to create dopamine and norepinephrine. So just a quick grocery shopping list. Then again, we need phenylalanine, tyrosine, B12, folic acid, B6, and vitamin C to create those dopamine and norepinephrine pieces there. So then for our last neurotransmitter here, we've got GABA. So GABA is one of the newbies on the block, but we know that it's really important for mood regulation as well. And with GABA, it does require two amino acids. It requires glutamine and glutamate. And then let me back up. Glutamine is converted to glutamate. So let me back up there. It requires glutamine. Glutamine is converted to glutamate, and then with the help of B6 and magnesium, we get GABA. So those are the important nutrients that we need for creating GABA. So we need glutamine, which can be converted to glutamate, and then we need B6 and magnesium to create these neurotransmitters. So with that said, that is a quick overview of how our foods can actually either fuel or fizzle our moods. If we don't have those nutrients, we're not going to be able to create those good filling neurotransmitters that kind of bring about those balanced moods. So this is a quick overview tonight of how food fuels or fizzles our mood. So I'm going to jump back into the chat here really quickly, see if we've got any questions. And if not, as always, feel free to drop your questions in the chat below, and I will come back to those anytime that they're coming up. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. I don't see any questions, but I see some of you on here live. If you do have any questions, though, drop them below. And I appreciate you for being here, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a fabulous evening and good night.